Well, UNICEF have released their latest report card on the wellbeing of children, and it surveys 43 countries that are members of the EU, European Union, and or the OECD, so high-income countries. It's called Report Card 19, Fragile Gains, Child Wellbeing at Risk in an Unpredictable World. And it uses globally comparable data sets between 2018 and 2022. Looks at life satisfaction, adolescent suicide, child mortality, overweight, academic proficiency, and social skills, and seeks to understand the reasons for these trends and how they can inform actions to improve child wellbeing. Now, New Zealand's included in this data set, and if you were a child taking home this report to your parents from your school teachers, you would either bin it or eat it on the way home. It makes disturbing reading. Let's check it out. So right from the outset of this report, we see just how low New Zealand is compared with other countries. Overall, we are 32nd out of 36 countries. I've circled it down there, virtually in the relegation zone in Premier League football terms. But for mental health, which is that first column, we are 36th, the worst. For physical health, we are 35th worst out of 41. And for education skills, slightly better at 25. But the worst for mental health, that is shocking. I'll come back to that. Then they show the changes. Have we improved, deteriorated, or relatively stable? Blue is improved, grey has remained the same, and orange is worsened. And as you can see, we've worsened in suicide and academic performance. We've improved on lower child mortality, which is good. But why do we rate so badly in mental health? Well, here's the suicide rates for 15 to 19-year-olds, and that's us out the far right. And the orange dot there represents the rate in 2018, and the blue block is the rate now. So we've worsened. If the orange historical dot is in the blue block, the rate has worsened for those countries. But note how far ahead we are of other countries. Our rate is almost 3 times higher than the average for high-income countries. And yet, taking a longer-term view, there has been notable progress in reducing adolescent suicide rates overall in the OECD. Despite so-called threats of COVID and climate alarmism and digital technology, and Trump, of course. But yeah, not New Zealand. We're going against the trend. Let's look at bullying. Wow. Second worst rate of bullying. And of course, bullying is associated with high rates of depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation and behaviour. If we want to tackle our horrendous suicide rates, tackle bullying. But all bullying. Not just the pink shirt day bullying, which is obsessed with a narrative of pushing radical sexuality and gender ideology on our children, raising the confusion, which I'll come back to as well. But kids get bullied because of weight, looks, ethnicity, which is actually one of the most common forms, disability, struggling with schoolwork, uncoordinated at sports. You know the story. We've all seen it and likely even done it when we were at school. It was never an LGBT plus thing. It was a human thing. And speaking of bullying people for their weights or looks, the prevalence of overweight and obesity in children is growing globally from an average of 17% back in 1990 to around 28% in 2022, the latest data. And in New Zealand, you'll see we have the third worst rate of being overweight or obese. And this is only going to get worse if we continue to see an increase in screen time and a decrease in physical activity. So the cell phone ban in schools is just a good start. In terms of child mortality, we're in the top third, fortunately not the worst. But the commentary is interesting because they say that the risk of child mortality is unequal and is linked to family economic factors. In the United States, children whose mothers have not graduated high school are estimated to face a 40% higher risk of early life mortality than children of college graduates. This disparity was partially driven by unintentional injuries and interpersonal violence. In Japan, infant mortality rates were found to be highest in households with unemployed adult members. The gap in infant mortality rates between employed and unemployed households has widened between 2019 and 2022. Now, it's important to remember that in addition to child mortality, income inequality drives multiple disparities in children's health incomes. Now, they also surveyed about life happiness and satisfaction. In a number of areas, you'll see the following on that graph from the top down. Girls are much less likely to have high life satisfaction than boys. Socioeconomic status didn't make that much difference in happiness. Exercising regularly is linked with higher life satisfaction. High use of social media is linked with lower life satisfaction. Frequency of talking with parents is strongly positively associated with life satisfaction. And no surprise, the frequency of being bullied has a strong negative association with life satisfaction. In fact, let's have a look at that parental engagement one. And we're not doing too badly. I've put the orange line there for the average, so we're above that. 80% of adolescents say they spend time talking with their parents, although their measure is at least once or twice a week. So it's a very, very low bar, isn't it? But children are most satisfied of talking with parents every day or almost every day, which is great. The report says children who spent more than 7 hours a day on social media had significantly lower than average life satisfaction, but it's actually just a small group, makes up only around 6% of 15-year-olds. And they do make the point that it is possible that either spending a lot of time on social media causes low life satisfaction, or a child with low life satisfaction tends to turn to intensive social media use. But here's the interesting one. Overall, children aren't happy. In the large majority of countries, the proportion of children with high life satisfaction fell between 2018 and 2022. So dropped from the orange dot there down. The magnitude of this decrease was in nearly all countries larger amongst girls. And sadly, for New Zealand, our teens, I've circled there, have the 6th lowest rate. A couple of other graphs. Academic skills. It's defined as the proportion of children who are still at school at age 15 and have reached basic proficiency in both reading and maths. We're slightly above the average, although we have dropped from the orange dot you can see there. But note that most countries have a drop from the orange dot, which is the 2018 figure. Here's the reading skills one. Orange is 2018, blue is now. So most countries have got worse, but you can see we're in the bottom half. And of course, everyone will blame COVID and lockdowns and climate change. But in fact, you see that the trend started around 2012. What else happened in 2012? Well, that's when smartphones really became common, didn't they? Should we be surprised that reading and math rates declined as a result? Now, I did chuckle at this one. To push the narrative of climate alarmism, they showed this chart. The number of students affected by climate-related school disruptions by country and major climate hazard. 2024, 13 million in Mexico, 4 million in Colombia, and almost 3 million in Chile, 5,000 in New Zealand due to a storm. Anyway, overall, on a serious note, it's a shocking report card. 32nd out of 36 countries in the OECD, but for mental health, the worst. Now, here's the key. We actually know the answers to this problem, but you probably won't read them in the report. In 2007, the UNICEF report looked at child wellbeing and said that the key risk factors are parental drug or alcohol abuse, family breakdown, single parenthood and weak family ties, in other words, decreasing marriage rates, poverty and poor housing, which often results from that breakdown of family and poor family formation, and low maternal age at birth, in other words, teenagers having children. And a SIF report in 2006 and a Children's Commissioner's report in 2009 also said those were the factors. Now, we put out a report in 2016 which looked at child abuse and family structure. What is the evidence telling us? And the research showed or suggested that the growth of child abuse in New Zealand has accompanied a reduction in marriage rates and an increase in cohabiting or single parent families. Broadly, child stability versus instability. And for the past 50 years in New Zealand, families which feature ex-nuptial births outside of marriage, one or both parents absent, or large numbers of siblings or very young mothers have been consistently overrepresented in child abuse statistics. And then in 2022, we released a report, Child and Youth Mental Health, Why New Zealand's Young Lead the Developed World in Poor Mental Health. Now, the author Lindsay Mitchell has been researching and commenting on welfare since 2001. She's written a number of reports for us over the past 6 years, showing a link between the weakening of family and marriage to worsening social trends: child poverty, child abuse, imprisonment, fertility, step families and the challenges, New Zealand's teen birth rate, and fatherlessness. Now, in this report on mental health and young people, she says that what she found was New Zealand has the worst youth suicide rate, self-harm and bullying statistics. Now, that was an earlier UNICEF report, but that's been confirmed in this latest report. Mental disorders have risen significantly, as has consumption of antidepressants and antipsychotics. And these increases are above what is occurring in the general population. Now, in this report, she got data from the New Zealand Health Survey, Mental Health and Addiction Service monitoring reports, Barmac, DHBs, longitudinal studies, Oranga Tamariki, Ministry of Social Development, and Youth 2000 surveys. And she said this: on the available evidence, New Zealand undoubtedly faces a mental health crisis amongst the young. But this may be just part of the picture. For instance, the Growing Up in New Zealand study, Auckland University, has lost touch with hundreds of children who are the most likely to be suffering poor mental health due to exposure to accumulating adverse experiences associated with transience, multiple parental relationship transitions, young, deprived, and poorly educated mothers who disproportionately experience hardship and depression. And she also noted that according to Oranga Tamariki, the alcohol and drug issue is prolific and increasing among Family Start clients, and various data suggests thousands of babies are exposed to alcohol and other substances in utero. Now, speak to many primary school teachers and they will concur with this observation. But Lindsay refers to a more pervasive depression and anxiety problem exacerbated less by mayhem and material deprivation and more by recent developments such as social media-driven poor self-image, heightened sensitivity to parental and or peer pressure, fear of failure, climate change anxiety, and confusion over sexual and gender identity. They may also be dealing with separated parents, torn loyalties, school and home life upheaval, and adapting to step siblings. You see, we need strong and stable families with strong and stable marriages, and investment especially in young families and young parents. Parents in general. Interestingly, I did a word search in this latest UNICEF report on the words marriage, drugs, alcohol, divorce, separation, maternal, all the things that UNICEF rightly pointed to back in 2007. Zero. I mean, there was discussion around family relationships and parent interaction, but very little about strong family formation, the right of a child to their biological mother and father, the risk factors of substance abuse, the risks of low maternal age and non-related adults in the house, and nothing around the protective factor of marriage or biological fathers or mothers. And that's the problem with UNICEF and these reports. They can identify the problem. That's the easy part. They just can't or won't point to the obvious and time-tested solutions. But we will. Now, just finally, by the way, in the budget this week, there will be a new $190 million social investment fund designed to transform the way the social services are delivered to vulnerable New Zealanders. Now, government agencies currently spend around $7 billion each year buying social services designed to improve lives from non-government agencies. Do you think $190 million dictated by the government is going to make any difference? The government can't solve this problem, irrespective of how much they fund it. Only strong marriages and families, a respect for life, protecting children from sexualization and confusion, and a return to biblical morality and standards will turn this around. But I'll get cancelled for saying that. Again.